Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Gerard Pratt, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Captain Lisa Batchelor. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We also warmly welcome Mrs. Daphne Chown, widow of Lieutenant Albert Chown, VC recipient. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Dubbo Public School, and from South Australia, Littlehampton Primary School. I invite you all now to please stand, if able, and join in singing the National Anthem. Please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops at Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Willie Edmond Campion. Willie Campion was born on the 7th of April 1892 in Minlaton, South Australia, to Joseph and Clara Campion. He grew up in Curramulka and attended Curramulka Public School. After leaving school, he became a stonemason. Following the outbreak of the First World War, Campion enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 30th of December 1914 and went into camp near Adelaide. His brother Gerald enlisted in mid-January 1915 and soon joined him. After their initial training, they were allotted to the 5th Reinforcements to the 10th Battalion. The brothers embarked from Outer Harbour, Adelaide, on the 20th of April on board the transport ship Hororata, bound for Egypt. After a brief stop, the brothers were sent on to Gallipoli, where they arrived in July. The climate and conditions in Gallipoli soon took their toll, and in September, Campion was evacuated to Malta, suffering dysentery. As his condition did not improve, he was sent to England for further recuperation. Campion returned to the battalion, now back in Egypt, in March of 1916 and reunited with his brother. He also became Lieutenant Arthur Blackburn's Batman. At the end of March, the battalion sailed for France. Following a period of orientation in the nursery sector near Armentières, the 10th Battalion moved south and on the 23rd of July took part in its first major battle on the Western Front at Pozières. The battalion suffered heavy casualties, one of whom was Campion. Wounded in his left arm and side by shrapnel, he was evacuated to England for treatment and recovery. He spent the next 11 months in England and was ill several times during his long recovery. He returned to France in June of 1917, and after several weeks at Le Havre, he rejoined the battalion in early July. Gerald, who had been ill, returned to the battalion in mid-August, and the brothers were reunited once again. The 10th Battalion took part in the battles of Menin Road and Polygon Wood in September, and was in support of the capture of Brunsend Ridge in early October. On the 8th of October, the battalion returned to the front line and was tasked to raid Celtic Wood. With little time to organise the raid and the battalion being under strength, men were brought in from other companies to make up the numbers required. Campion was amongst those selected for the raid. In the early hours of the 9th of October, the raiding party, led by Lieutenant Frank Scott, attacked Celtic Wood. The Australians began taking casualties as soon as they began their advance. The raid was a disaster, and the Australians suffered heavy casualties. Lieutenant Scott was killed, and Campion was listed amongst the missing. A later investigation found that Willie had been killed instantly by a shell during the attack. He was 25 years old. Campion's remains were not located after the war, and his name was added to the list of those missing on the Meningate Memorial in Ypres. In a further blow to the Campion family, Gerald Campion was mortally wounded early the next morning as the battalion prepared to leave the front line. He was taken to a nearby casualty clearing station, but died from his wounds soon after. He was 27 years old. He was buried in the Lissenthuk Military Cemetery. Willie Campion's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Willie Edmond Campion, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. Please feel free to visit the poppy display in the grounds as you leave. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.